Sy Hersh, one of the most impactful journalists of all time, came out with a story this week on how the U.S. blew up the Nord Stream 2 pipelines. And he got the inside story from a source and lays out in great detail how it went down. And the planning for this began, he says, in late 2021. And the timing there is interesting because, yes, that is when Russian troops were massing on Ukraine's border. But December 2021 is also when Russia put proposals to the U.S., these extensive draft treaties, to try to address Russia's security concerns about NATO expansion. And rather than address those concerns and try to negotiate, the U.S. instead started planning for a proxy war, or continued planning for a proxy war. And among those plans was turning to blowing up the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. And why do they want to blow up the Nord Stream 2 pipeline? Well, as Sy Hersh points out, the U.S. has long recognized that if the Nord Stream 2 pipeline goes online, that would then bring more cheap energy from Russia to Germany. And that would make it a lot more difficult to wage a proxy war in Russia against Russia and Ukraine, because to do that, you need Germany on board, because Germany is the sort of financial center of Europe. And if it's not on board, then a proxy war will be impossible. And if Germany is receiving even more cheap energy from Russia, then Germany is not going to be wanting to cut that off and alienate its source of cheap energy. So the U.S. found the solution, which was to blow it up. And Sy Hersh goes through the details of how it went down, and he asserts that the U.S.
Well, before let's get into the details, but before we do, I just wanted to make one additional point, which is that the threat to U.S. empire is much greater than German non-cooperation in the Ukraine proxy war. There has been a historic effort, post-war effort, led most notably by former West German Chancellor Willy Brandt, to bring Russian energy and resources and German technological know-how together to forge a more independent European power center, to make Western Europe more independent from the US. And NATO exists as a obstacle overtly and expressly to prevent Europe from being more independent from the US. As Sy Hersh points out, that's why Jens Stoltenberg, who has been sort of a US asset since the Vietnam era, according to Sy, has been chosen as Secretary General. And he's the former Norwegian Prime Minister who's fully on board with the US. Sy claims this attack was carried out from Norway, but the point is, the US does not want a more independent Germany, and Nord Stream was a pipeline to European independence. So let's talk about the details here.
Yeah, and we played that clip before on a recent stream of Stratfor founder George Friedman, where he said that the primordial U.S. interest is severing the relationship between Germany and Russia, because them cooperating would be a threat to U.S. hegemony. And so blowing up this huge infrastructure project is a part of that. And so I'm really glad you pointed out this is not just a part of the Ukraine proxy war. It's even bigger. It's even bigger to U.S. geostrategic aims. So in terms of what Hersh reveals, his article says that the operation to plant the explosives was done under the cover of a NATO exercise in June 2022, which many people speculated about at the time. After Nord Stream was bombed, people pointed out that there was this exercise going on nearby. And Hersh says that that was used as a cover for these U.S. Navy divers to plunge and plant the explosives. And then a few months later, in September of 2022, a surveillance plane was sent and then dropped basically something in the water that set off a remote triggered explosion. And 3 of the 4 bombs went off. The 4th one didn't.
And so this was carried out with a special diving team that trained in Panama City, Florida, according to Sy Hersh, expert saboteurs. How did the authorization take place?
Well, according to Sy Hersh, it came from the White House. Jake Sullivan was the person who relayed the orders, but it was understood that they were acting on behalf of the president. And similar to what happened with Syria, in basically keeping the Syria dirty war off the books and away from congressional oversight, there was some maneuvering done to basically put this in the realm of the military, so that there wouldn't even have to be a briefing to the Gang of 8, the congressional leaders who are supposed to be briefed on covert operations like this, which is similar to what Sy Hersh revealed about Syria, Because if you go back and read his articles in the London Review of Books about the Syria dirty war, he reported that the way that the Obama administration got around briefing Congress about arming sectarian death squads and spending billions of dollars on that in Syria is that they basically subcontracted British intelligence. And so because this was a partnership with a foreign intelligence service, that then allowed them to have a loophole where they didn't have to brief Congress. So they pulled off, according to Sy Hersh, a similar trick here.
Yeah. And so ultimately, Biden gave it the go-ahead. He gave it the attaboy.
He gave it the attaboy, exactly. Yeah. And that's a reference to Victoria Nuland on that leaked tape where she's plotting who the next Ukrainian government will be after a coup happens, which is exactly what happened a few weeks later.
And she says, F the EU.
Yeah.
This is the ultimate F the EU.
Yes, it is.
What can you do? We just blew up your pipeline. We made millions of people uncomfortable in winter. We cost you billions and billions in revenue. We destroyed you as a political force. And where's German media on Sy Hersh?
They're attacking him. I've heard from some German friends today who report that it's just universally, at least from their reading, I haven't checked this myself, but that Sy Hersh is getting attacked, and some outlets are citing Bellingcat to try to make their case. Bellingcat, of course, is the NATO troll farm that we've done a lot to expose here at the Gray Zone. And so that's that's their response from what I'm hearing to Hersh's story. But there are some members of parliament who are raising this issue. There was a plenary held today by some members of parliament in Germany who are raising this issue. So we'll see. I mean, look, Olaf Scholz, how can he politically survive this if Germany had a functioning political system? He's sabotaged his country's economy. I mean, they've had to shut down entire factories. Industries have been really, really hurt. Apparently, they keep the temperatures pretty low inside the German parliament because they have to conserve heat. So people are like bundled up inside the German parliament. That's something I heard. I haven't confirmed that. That's something I heard. And then now he's also gotten played on the tanks. So he committed to send all these Leopard tanks to Ukraine, and he held it as some breakthrough because he got the U.S. to send their tanks as well. But then the U.S. is like, oh yeah, we're not going to send ours for a year, maybe 2 years. And all these other European states who initially signed on are not delivering them. This was in the Wall Street Journal this week. So Scholz is getting played. And I don't know how he can survive this politically, especially if more on this comes out.
I watched some of the debate over sending the tanks, and most of the opposition came from AfD, Alternative for Deutschland, which is the right-wing party that's considered, I mean, it's essentially under the surveillance of the German national police. It's considered, unacceptable. And then Die Linke, you have Sarah Wagenknecht and a few others from the left party. But the rest of the coalition doesn't seem to have any problem with this. So I wonder if there's any alternative to them within the German political spectrum. And I forgot to mention, since we brought up Victoria Nuland and we played this clip before, Sy Hersh quotes it at the end of his piece. Victoria Nuland stating during the Senate, I think it was a Senate Intelligence Committee hearing, or Senate Foreign Relations Committee hearing. She said, I'm to Ted Cruz, I think the administration is very gratified to know that Nord Stream is now, as you like to say, a hunk of metal at the bottom of the sea. I mean, we have statement after statement, Biden basically telegraphing his punches, saying we will take it out back in, was it February?
Yeah.
2022. I mean, the U.S. has said, again, Tony Blinken saying it's a fantastic opportunity.
Yep. Yep.
How is there any doubt at this point? We're supposed to believe that Russia blew up one of the most important pieces of Putin's legacy other than the Kerch Bridge.
Yeah. Yeah. And look at the reaction in U.S. media. Has the Washington Post or the Times picked this up? If they do, I think it's a very big if. I think they'll only do it to try to discredit Sy Hersh. Otherwise, I don't see any traction in the U.S. In Europe, it's a bit more discussed. The Times of London did a story. But the attacks on Sy Hersh and the contempt he gets from people who call themselves journalists now this is one of the most accomplished journalists ever. And he has all the awards to show for it. He's in so many stories, and in so many times he's reported stories where the White House initially says this is all a lie, but then it turns out to be 100% true. Abu Ghraib, He exposed that. He exposed that the Obama administration's official story about how it killed bin Laden was basically full of holes. And the White House initially denied all that. But later on, Sy was vindicated. And he's also attacked for daring to question the allegation that Syria used chemical weapons on its own people. But there again, he's been proven right time after time. In Ghouta 2013, he reported that U.S. intelligence had serious doubts about the claim that Syria used chemical weapons in Ghouta in 2013. And so Sy reported that in 2013 and 2014. In 2016, when Obama was leaving office, he gave an exit interview to Jeffrey Goldberg of The Atlantic. And what did he say? He said, oh, yeah, actually, when all that was happening, James Clapper, my director of national intelligence, came to me and said that the intelligence was not a slam dunk. And that was a deliberate reference to what George Tenet said to George W. Bush about Iraq WMDs. So the implications of that comment from Clapper were obvious. And that's why Obama didn't bomb Syria, is because he was told the intelligence was basically not there. So Obama vindicated Sy Hersh. And then, of course, the OPCW whistleblowers who exposed the massive deception in Duma just underscored the amount of fraud that has been perpetrated to make these claims of Syria chemical weapons attacks, and thereby showing that Sy Hersh has been right all along to question them.
Well, some of the media attacks aren't even about whether Sy Hersh was right. It's about whether we should even be talking about the U.S. carrying out this gargantuan terror attack. Here's Business Insider's Mia Jankowicz. I don't know if she's related to Nina Jankowicz.
That was my question too. I tried to look it up, but I haven't found an answer yet. But yeah.
Claim by a discredited journalist that the U.S. secretly blew up the Nord Stream pipeline is proving a gift to Putin. So, yeah, Sy Hersh is discredited.
I don't know who this person is who wrote
That's
this. So I don't know. I can't speak to what journalistic accomplishments she has, but I'm going to guess that they're probably not the level of Seymour Hersh. Just as I'm confident that pretty much all of Sy Hersh's detractors combined put all their accomplishments together, and they are not even a fraction of what Sy Hersh has done. So it's so funny to me that people can pretend as if Sy Hersh is discredited when he's he's one of the most accomplished and impactful journalists to ever live.
Yeah, but even if he's right, it's a gift to Putin.
Yeah.
Because loose lips sink ships. This is war, and we need to be able to wage this war in secret. We cannot tell the CIA's secrets because we are at war with Russia, except we're not. Are we? But, I looked at her work. It's like, what you get with all these people working, covering disinformation. They're on the disinformation beat. They're just hand puppets for the intelligence services. That's all they are. Yeah. And that's their way up the corporate ladder. By the way, Business Insider is owned by Axel Springer, who is the centrist, center-right kind of tabloid empire. He controls the tabloid empire of Germany. Bild and so many other publications are owned by Berliner Morgenpost, owned by Axel Springer, and employees of the Springer Press have to actually sign a loyalty oath to support the transatlantic relationship between Germany and the U.S. and to support the special relationship with Israel, where they have historically. So that's, Business Insider. It's pretty amazing. I don't make anyone sign loyalty oaths at the Gray Zone.
The thing is, these headlines that we show, I mean, we give them more attention than they otherwise ever would get. I don't know who reads these publications anymore.
Yeah.
All these digital outlets are failing. They just exist to be an echo chamber. They don't provide any real, I mean, sometimes I'm sure you'll have some actual authentic journalism done there. I shouldn't categorically dismiss it, but on stories like this, where it's just regurgitating state propaganda. I mean, so many outlets like this now, and all they do is provide fodder for us to make fun of. But otherwise, I don't think they have any kind of impact.
Well, what's interesting also is that many of the people attacking Sy Hersh's piece haven't even read it, let alone put forward a compelling case of how Russia attacked its own pipeline. I mean, presumably, Bellingcat would be doing like open source intelligence based on lots of all the surveillance around the pipelines, which is plentiful. They should be getting it fed to them, just like they got the Skripal supposed perpetrators' passport photos fed to them by British intelligence. but that hasn't happened yet. But this is an interesting exchange between Sam Husseini, our friend Sam Husseini, who, got into the State Department briefing room, is credentialed, has been there over the years asking tough questions of the spokesman. And here he is with Ned Price, who you've actually had an exchange with, Aaron, about Sy Hersh's piece.
I'm sure you're aware of the new report from Seymour Hersh, how America took out the Nord Stream pipeline and the White House's denial of any involvement. Given the longstanding U.S. opposition to the pipeline, Secretary Blinken's calling its demise a tremendous opportunity, and Undersecretary of State Nuland's saying that the U.S. officials were pleased with the destruction of the pipeline, especially the Sweden's secretive investigation. Do you think the U.S. government's denial of involvement is credible?
I absolutely do, and I repeat it here. Anything else?
Let me follow up on that, if I might. Have you or anybody else at the State Department been in communication with German, Norwegian ambassadors or other allies or officials on this matter?
On the matter of Nord Stream 2?
On the matter of the latest allegations, which give a fairly, it's one anonymous source. It is a fairly
it would not be it would not be typical for us to engage allies and partners on something that is utter and complete nonsense and that should be rejected out of hand by anyone who is looking at it through through an objective lens. Yes, go ahead.
An objective
one more
lens.
aspect on this. One of the allegations that Hersh makes is that it was
See, he really wants to get past this question.
taken by the CIA in order to prevent involvement, oversight as a covert operation. Did you read the piece?
I'm familiar with it.
One of his allegations is that it was taken off.
Rather than let this propaganda be aired in the briefing room.
Well, Ned Price admits that he didn't even read the piece there. So he doesn't even know what he's denouncing as propaganda, but now he's starting to kind of melt down.
Let me just say, it is a fundamental misunderstanding of oversight in our U.S. Congress. Beyond getting his facts entirely wrong, as he has before, and
now he's calling Seymour Hersh a discredited journalist because he upset the State Department before.
High-profile ways. It is a fundamental misunderstanding to suggest that our intelligence community is not subject to oversight. Anyone who writes that, anything like that, should not be believed on any fact that
he wrote that it was taken off of the CIA and put under military in order to prevent.
Our military is also subject to rigorous oversight.
That's my question.
Yes. The answer is yes.
Do you recognize and abide by the war powers clause in such a situation?
Yeah, I don't know how it ended because Sam only had 2 minutes and 20 seconds there. But what do you make of that exchange, Aaron?
First of all, I love where he says no propaganda in the briefing room, when that's just his job, is to deliver propaganda in the briefing room every day. But yeah, no, as you pointed out, it's telling. He says he doesn't admit to reading the piece. He says he's familiar with it. And the point is, look, spokespeople are not given all the information. So it's quite possible that Ned Price doesn't actually know that the U.S. is responsible for the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. They're just told what to say. And legally, of course, the U.S. is allowed to lie to the media when it comes to covert activities. That's law. But I'll be curious to see what the principals say and what kind of language they use, and whether they issue blanket denials, like, no, that we did not blow up the Nord Stream pipeline, this is false, or whether they issue non-denial denials, where they say stuff like, I'm not going to dignify that with a response. This is all typical Russian propaganda, stuff like that. And so I'll be curious to see if ever they get asked, Jake Sullivan, Victoria Nuland, William Burns, what they have to say about this, because they're the players here. They're named in Sy Hersh's story. They're the ones who were involved. They're the ones who, like Nuland, who talked about how great this was. So they're the ones who should be answering these questions, not a spokesperson whose job it is to lie and spin. I mean, these are all performative displays. But great questions from Sam Husseini, and I hope the principals get questioned on this very, very soon. And I can't wait to hear what they have to say.
Well, this was an act of war. And the way the United States public reacted to a balloon flying 80,000 feet in the sky, a bunch of hot air with no weapons.
Yeah.
They treated that like an act of war.
Mm-hmm.
People were like ready to run out and shoot with their 50 caliber machine guns and AR-15 Bushmasters or whatever into the sky to shoot that Chinese balloon out. of the sky. Just imagine if China or Russia were blowing up our pipelines, surrounding us with military bases, putting long, medium range rocket systems on our borders. How would the American public react to that? Because Russia has not retaliated against the United States in the way that I think the US would if Russia or China blew up our pipelines. That's why this is so significant. And the American public had no say in whether to carry out this titanic act of war because it was done in secret, as Sy reports, through our secret government, the CIA. And this is what all the liberals were mad about during the Bush administration, the unitary executive, where Bush was making all these decisions on matters like going to war and torture without involving Congress, without going through democratic mechanisms, or without going through the courts. And his lawyers had come up with this model of the executive who gets to be the decider. That's precisely what Biden did here with his intelligence services.
Yep.
And Victoria Nuland, I mean, who is she? A neocon ideologue married to Robert Kagan, who conceived the doctrine of permanent total U.S. control over the entire globe and destroying any country that doesn't follow its orders, the benevolent dictator or benevolent hegemon. And she's in there making these decisions. This should be a gigantic scandal. I mean, this should bring hundreds of thousands of people out on February 19th. But the thing is, in the U.S., we don't face the same consequences that Russians face, or historically.
And our media insulates us from learning the facts, which is why Sy Hersh had to go and publish this independently, is because there's no more room for even someone as accomplished as he is inside the establishment. And by the way, where was the environmental movement on this too? This was a huge emission of methane gas. Do we want to be allowing our government just to blow up pipelines when it serves their hegemonic aims? I saw nothing from the environmental movement on this. Maybe I missed it, but
it shows how owned the environmental movement is, to the extent that it is a movement. I mean, the Sierra Club got one of their biggest donors is Mike Bloomberg.
Yeah, there we go.
You got Richard Branson in there. It's basically the green billionaires are running the environmental movement, and they're completely in bed with the administration or the regime, if you can call it. And they said nothing. Dmitry Lascaris, our friend in Canada, was one of the few critics, I think, who pointed this out. The Green Party, the Green Parties of the world, what have they said? What about the Green Party in Germany? Was Annalena Baerbock secretly happy about the destruction of this pipeline because it creates more of an impetus for renewable energy sources, for more wind farms and solar farms in Germany? Ursula von der Leyen said after the Nord Stream attacks and the shutdown on the general boycott of Russian gas that this will power the green future. She openly celebrated it, the EU commissioner. So sick people, I mean, because at the end of the day, it's average people, poor people in Western Europe, particularly, who will suffer because of this. And they're celebrating that the winter isn't that cold this year, but this isn't going to be the last winter for which they will suffer.
Yeah. Absolutely. Next winter is going to be an issue as well, because they have to store enough gas, and where's it going to come from?
Yeah.
Especially if this, it's and of course, and it's also more expensive because now parts of Europe are still receiving Russian gas, but because of the bombing of the Nord Stream 2, they have to get it elsewhere, like via Turkey. So it goes to Turkey and then back up to the rest of Europe, which means Turkey gets to profit off of this with transit fees, but it's European states that have to pay the markup. Right. And so, but the U.S. doesn't care. And this actually, of course, increases the dependency of, as a bonus, it also increases the dependency of Germany and other European states on American liquefied gas. So for neocons, this is just a win-win. And they've completely bullied Germany into going along with them. So, whereas before Merkel had some sort of independence, and that's why presumably the Obama administration spied on her phones, and other former German leaders, Scholz is completely co-opted.
Yeah, I mean, there are rumors in Germany, I don't know if they have any substance, that the U.S. was covertly backing the Green Party. Because
that makes sense to me. That makes sense to me. I mean, when you look at what they say, it's hard not to buy that because they sound as if they're puppets of the State Department, especially Baerbock.